Welcome to the We Rock DM podcast, your source for all things digital marketing. Join hosts Daniel Bissett and Trisha Olberg as they explore the latest trends and share their expertise on how to succeed in the digital age. Tune in for expert advice on search engine optimization, social media marketing, and content strategy. We make kick-ass stuff kick-ass. So join us and learn how to rock your digital marketing game. Welcome to another exciting episode of We Rock DM Amplified. Today we have a distinguished guest who has been a pivotal figure in the Austin tech community. Thom Singer, the CEO of the Austin Technology Council since 2022, joins us to share his wealth of experience and insights. With over 3 decades of dedication to the tech community, Thom is passionate about fostering community, collaboration, and conversations within the local ecosystem. His efforts have significantly contributed to strengthening the bonds between tech professionals and organizations in Austin and beyond. But beyond his leadership at ATC, Thom is an accomplished keynote speaker, having delivered speeches at more than, 1,400 conferences across various industries. His dynamic presentations have inspired countless professionals, and he often speaks on behalf of ATC about the fascinating history of Austin tech. Please join us, Daniel Bissett and Trisha Olberg, in welcoming Thom Singer to the We Rock DM Amplified podcast. Thom, welcome.
Hi, Thom.
Hey, Daniel, Trisha. Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Let's rock this.
Let's rock it. That's
Absolutely.
Right. We're excited.
So one of the first things I like to start off with in these podcasts is kind of a TLDR, too long didn't read. How did you get here? So, 1,400 keynote speaking conferences, opportunities, what are they? Man, that's insane. That's a huge number. You have to have done something before then for people to want to hear what you had to say now, right? So what did you do to get into that space to then get into the ATC arena?
Sure. So my background is I was in sales and marketing, and I started off doing several different things, kind of had an eclectic background. I actually sold advertising for the Austin Chamber of Commerce for 2.5 years, working for their publisher back in the early 90s. And that was about the time that Austin sort of took off as sort of a tech place. So I had sort of a sideline to sort of watch it. And then I started in jobs where I was selling to the tech community. I ended up becoming the marketing director for the biggest tech law firm at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s here in Austin. I was the marketing director for a firm, California law firm called Brobeck, Flager, and Harrison that focused on tech startups, venture-funded entities. And I was their marketing director for Austin and Dallas. And I did that for a couple of years. And then that firm went away. And I moved with the corporate and securities lawyers over to Andrews Kurth, which was a big Texas firm out of Houston. Again, my role was to be the marketing and business development director for Austin and Dallas. And when you're in marketing and sales roles over a career, you go to a lot of conferences.
Yeah.
And I can remember sitting in the audience in those conference room chairs, watching the speakers on stage and thinking, wow, she or he, they have a better job than I do. And I started studying what did it take to do that? And I was already involved in a Toastmasters club. And I started going up and asking professional speakers, how'd you get in this business? And obviously there were celebrities, but there were a lot of people who were just accomplished business people who had something to say and had a unique angle. And one of the things that happened to me along the way throughout my career was a lot of the places that I worked, not because of me, either left Austin or went out of business. In fact, that law firm collapsed at the time in the largest collapse of a big law firm. There have been bigger ones since, but at the time it was a pretty big collapse. It wasn't marketing's fault. And so every time I would have a company either want to relocate me to another city or they would close their Austin office or go down, I would always have a new job in 2 or 3 weeks. And I barely made an outbound call. And people started saying, Thom, you're the only person I know who gets laid off up. And they would ask me how I did that. So I started speaking and writing about how do you network? Why do you get involved in the community? Why do you support nonprofits that support your business community, both locally and nationally? Why are trade associations still important in today's world? And that led to more and more speaking opportunities. I wrote a couple of books. And then in 2009, I was the business development director for a consulting firm. And 2008, 2009, the recession, there were layoffs, and I found myself out of work, and there were no jobs for, marketing professionals in service firms. And I told my wife, I'm just going to give it a shot. I'm going to try to go at it as a professional speaker. And from 2009 until 2020, that's all I did for my career, speaking about 30 to 50 times a year at industry conferences about how do you build relationships? Why do you build relationships? And how can we connect with people in a way that makes a difference for everybody?
Wow. I just have so many questions. What a cool, and I love your topic, your focus. We've been talking a lot about ways to network, especially around here in Austin. So it sounds like you're the perfect person for us to talk to. So go ahead and start telling us about the Austin Technology Council, like what your goals are for the council. That we're excited that we're members now. Woohoo!
We're excited to have We Rock DM as a new member and supporter.
Yeah.
So the Austin Technology Council. So I moved to Austin in 1991, and like I said, that was sort of before the real growth. Sort of the beginning days of tech in Austin really taking off. The Austin Technology Council was founded in 1992. I had nothing to do with it, but I worked at the Chamber of Commerce at the time, so I was aware of ATC and sort of the work that they were doing. So I watched it from its early days, and I was involved. When I worked for the technology law firm, we would sponsor things that ATC did. We would collaborate with them on business, and it became a real powerful organization as the early days of tech sort of grew. So I always say that it's a 32-year-old legacy organization here in Austin. I was hired as we were coming out of the pandemic to sort of reinvent, sort of look to a new direction. Anything that's 30 years old at that time, you got to give it sort of a refresh. And they came to me for two reasons. One is because I had a strong network in the community, people knew what was going on with me. I'm not shy about the good or the bad. Some people hide all of their flaws or mistakes that they make. I'm pretty honest about when things aren't going my way, or whether I screw up or something bad happens. And my speaking career in 2020 dissolved. I mean, if you made your living for 12 years standing up in front of audiences at association events, and suddenly a pandemic hits and all events are canceled, 2020 was going to be my most profitable, largest year ever. I had more things on the books in March than I had ever had for speaking. And within 4 months, everything for the rest of the year canceled. Everything was canceled into 21. And in 22, as things started to come back, most associations and companies had already paid deposits to speakers 2 years earlier. So they weren't looking for new people. And so I was kind of in a financial jam. So people knew it. So they thought, well, his topic is community building. Maybe he would want to come and help rebuild and restart the future for ATC. So that's how I ended up there. Part of what I did is I negotiated that I could keep my speaking business because I'm really passionate about it, and that I could go out and speak on behalf of ATC. So between the two, I pretty much have a full calendar of speaking between my own business and representing ATC on stages around Austin, for the Chamber of Commerce, for Opportunity Austin, really for any nonprofits or other groups that are tech related who want to hear about the history of tech in Austin.
Clearly, you're an enthusiastic speaker. But that is also presumably, not trying to be unfair, that's also part of the job, is to sound enthusiastic, right? Out of curiosity, what is the one topic that you can't help yourself from enjoying speaking about? Actually enjoying. Well, I mean,
for my personal business, I talk about, my keynote is called Uncommon Connections, and the subtitle has recently changed because I keep it up to date with what's going on in the world. The subtitle is HI, which is human interaction in an AI focused world. So it's all about, why your relationships matter. And I talk to a lot of young professionals groups, and a lot of younger professionals haven't really been educated on why their network matters. They think, oh, I have 3,000 people I'm connected to on LinkedIn. Isn't that enough? And I tell people that a like, a link, a share, and a follow, it's not really a network, right? And same thing in running a nonprofit organization. Joining is great. I need members. I need companies to join so that I can pay my salary. I'm about to hire somebody else to help me. I can pay their salary. We can cover things like HubSpot and the internet and everything we have to do. But just giving money to an organization, to a trade association, doesn't do anything. You've got to show up at the events. You have to sponsor events. You have to be on their podcast. You have to write things for their newsletters. That's how you get noticed in a community, is by being active in a community. So I get really passionate, whether I'm speaking for my own business or whether I'm representing ATC, on why community matters, right? My tagline, and it's sort of bled into the Austin Technology Council, but what I've been speaking about for over a decade is that community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. And so when we think about the problems that we face in our careers, in our companies, in our communities, more community collaboration and conversation is the answer. So I get really excited about that.
That's a great topic to get excited about. And we talk about this often because as a digital marketing agency, we will also, to back up, Daniel and I both teach digital marketing boot camps up at the University of Texas. Daniel is actually the instructor, and I've been his TA a couple times. And Daniel is actually going to be teaching an adjunct undergrad course this fall. And so that's how we got our start. That's where we met, was teaching that boot camp at UT. And so many of our connections have come from a result of teaching that boot camp. So many. Mm-hmm. And it really laid the foundation for us to start our business together. So many of the clients that we've had have been referrals or connections that we already had, right? So what would you say, Daniel? 95%? It is hugely important.
Mm-hmm. The irony of running and operating digital marketing agencies is that we do zero digital marketing for our agency.
Right.
Everything that we do.
The cobbler's children have no shoes, is what they used to say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not technically true. We do digital marketing for ourselves. We just don't do any paid. Because the bulk, like you were saying, Trisha, probably 90%, possibly more, of our work over the past couple of years that we've been together has all been network related. Mm-hmm. Referrals, people who knew someone that knew us, that worked with us, so your messaging speaks very close to my heart, which is ironic because I want to sell ads to other organizations, right? And I'm like, I don't actually do that for myself, but that's the nature of this particular space that we're in as well.
Yeah.
Networking, correct me if I'm wrong, but networking isn't necessarily going to sell the shoes that you have in your e-commerce store. It's not going to sell them. It actually might sell them in bulk if you meet the right person, the right buyer, right? But anyway.
Well, and I tell everybody, look, it's not that, advertising isn't important. It's not that marketing isn't important. It's not that having videos and online and social media isn't important. It's that it all has to be connected to humans. There's so many examples. Well, not so many, but there's a handful of examples of outliers who get super famous, right? The Kardashians, all these other people, because they do certain things. But that's not the rest of us aren't that way. Our digital marketing, our social media, it needs to enhance who we are as a person, because all business for the most part is still personal.
Yeah, I agree. And that's how you earn trust. People want to know who you are as a person. It's interesting. So we have a client, her name is Gay Gaddis, and she has a Women Who Mean Business program up at UT. And she's also started T3. You've been around in the tech community for a long time. Are you familiar with T3? She's the owner and CEO.
I know Gay is for sure.
Yeah. So we've built 2 sites for her, and I was helping her with her digital marketing strategy. And we started having her just talk randomly about totally unrelated things to her program, or she talks about her favorite recipes. She talks about her dogs. And what do you think gets the most engagement? The personal.
Absolutely.
Right. Yep. And it's because you're learning about that person, and that's really important. So, this all ties together. I agree. There needs to be a personal aspect, even in your digital marketing. And back to what what you were saying about how we don't do a lot of digital marketing for ourselves. It depends what kind. We're trying to do the personal kind. It really doesn't. We're services based, right? So it depends on your industry. Services, I think it's even more important. to build personal connections even more. That's because you're more or less, those companies are trusting you to build their business. And so they really need to know that there's a connection there. So it depends
and trust
on the
is really trust is the foundation of everything in business. I'm a licensed presenter for an organization called the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. And it's 20 years worth of graduate level research done by a guy named David Horsager. And he has now licensed that material to some other speakers and coaches and trainers. And I've been working with his program for the last 3 years. And I weave it into my keynotes, but I also do some consulting where I'll work with companies and they'll take an assessment and they'll be able to see how their company is viewed, how their workers view the company from trust. And what I remind everybody is, look, we can't trust a thing. We trust people. Now, your company is just a conglomeration of people, but your clients trust the people, not the logo.
So true. So true. Logos are important too, though. I have to throw that in as a designer.
You're a designer.
Is important. That's right. I have to, speak for the designers out there. But yes, it all goes together.
So, with your deep knowledge of tech in Austin, how do you harness that to grow the ATC?
Well, our society has changed a little bit over the last 20 years, right? It used to be, if you were successful, some mentor somewhere pulled you aside and said, to those who are given a lot, much is expected. And I remember being like 35 years old and having one of my mentors say to me, okay, what boards are you serving on? Or who are you mentoring? Or what are you doing to serve our community for the next generation? And I don't know that that's necessarily being taught, as much to that next generation. So for me, I think that's sort of one of the things that ATC has to do is we have to look, not only where do we come from? I mean, I know a lot about the history and I speak about the history, but I try to tell everybody we can't live in the past. So one of the mottos I have for ATC is we celebrate the past, we're present in the now, and we look to the future. And by celebrating the past, we can bring some of those legends who helped create this town and talk about the things they did. They talk about Dr. George Kosmetsky. They call Dr. George Kosmetsky the godfather of Austin Tech. He was the dean of the business school from 1966 for about, I think it was something like 17 years. And he was, he reinvented the business school and helped reinvent University of Texas to become, one of the top 10, 20 organizations in the whole world. And it all started with bringing the community together. And he famously said, if we don't bring the community together, where will our grandchildren work? Because he believed we had to build a bigger business infrastructure in Austin, and that was all going to happen around technology. But as busy as he was with that, he founded IC Squared. He was super involved nationally with a bunch of different programs. They said that if you needed him in the community, or if there was a major event going on in the tech community, he was there. He showed up, even if he wasn't on a panel or being asked to speak. If it was important for the community, he was there. And so many of the people who were my mentors basically said, you lead by example. You show up, because the serendipity of who you meet, is important. And so I think that's one of the things that ATC needs to do is look to how do we bring the community together without egos, without agendas, just for the good of where are we today and where do we go tomorrow?
I love it. It is harder to do that now. And like you said, the next generation, I'm just thinking about my college-aged kids. This is just an example. Neither of them were in a huge rush to get their driver's licenses. And let me explain how this is related. When I was a kid, the day I turned 16, I was at the DMV. And it's because back then you had to drive to your friend's house to visit with them, or you try to get on the landline and, their mother might pick up, right? Like you don't get the privacy. So we used to have to get together more. We used to have to do that. And now it's so easy to not do that. It's so easy. And yeah, so both my kids, they didn't see an urgency like I did, because they're like, well, I talk to people online all the time. My son's a gamer. He's talking to people on games all the time. And that's not a real connection. It's not a real connection. That is becoming harder and harder. It's becoming more difficult in the times that we live in. It's true. It's true. but it's so important. And so I do love that your mission of trying to bring, new life to that. And it's so important that we all do this. We have some contractors that work for us, and they were former students, and we're always trying to get each other to go to networking events. We're tagging each other. We're like, okay, we got to do it. Oh, but I want to stay home, and I just want to sit on my, my couch and check Facebook.
Watch Netflix.
Like, no, get off. We just like push each other. If you go, I'll go. Okay. So I think that's important to try to encourage that in our colleagues and our other businesses, and what you're doing with Austin Technology Council. Yeah, I think that's really important. It's very cool.
Something you said about being there and showing up. We try to do that ourselves. Our small part, teaching digital marketing for UT, we have lots of very, very eager students who really want to cut their teeth and don't have the opportunity, the experience to just necessarily get hired straight out of the gate. Some of them get hired before they've even graduated. A lot of it has to do with background experience, So we're regularly looking for opportunities for them, internships. We provide internships as often as we possibly can, but there are only so many interns you can carry at any one time. But it is important to have real, tangible ways to help. What is ATC? What are you doing to try and help the community? I understand that as a organization, you're providing network opportunities for businesses like ours to meet and mingle. But for the larger Austin community, are y'all part of other events or programs that are really geared to helping non-members?
Sure. One of the things that I've said since I've taken over the Austin Technology Council is that we're a community group first and a membership group second. So we can't exist anymore in the world if you're just a pay-to-play organization, because there's so many options. I mean, there used to be very few places you could go and network in the city. They say that Austin has more business nonprofits per capita, or at least before the pandemic, than any other city in Austin. So you can't be like mine and that, I want all the membership, I want all the sponsorship money. So what I've done is I've created these community partnerships. We just had a large event called the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, and it was the first year of an ongoing into forever event. However, it's going to take about 6 or 7 years to populate the Hall of Fame with the people who need to be in it going back over the last 40, 50 years. So we put 8 legacy foundational people in. We had a 2024 inductee, and then we have First Time Founder Award, which is sort of looking to the future. And I had 10 different business nonprofits, from the Chamber of Commerce to Opportunity Austin to Austin Women in Technology, Div Inc., the Association for Corporate Growth. I'm going to forget some, but I had 10 of them that they were my partners for the event, because the event, it was an event for ATC. It was a profit center event for my nonprofit. However, it wasn't just an ATC event. The Austin Tech Hall of Fame is about everybody. To nominate somebody, you didn't have to be a member. To be nominated, you never had to have been part of the organization. This is about the tech ecosystem. And so I had 10 different groups who promoted it for me to their membership. And I do the same for them. The Chamber has their business awards coming up, and I've been really involved in getting my members to nominate themselves for the Chamber's business awards, because I want to see tech really well represented in the Greater Austin Business Awards, because oftentimes it goes to a lot of other companies, great companies, but there's not as much tech. So I really pushed this year to make sure that lots of tech companies would apply. I partner with the Chamber. We're doing an AI breakfast in October. We're going to do Austin San Antonio corridor breakfast with the association, or lunch, with the Association for Corporate Growth next year. So yes, I work with everybody. If other groups are willing to promote my stuff, I'm willing to promote theirs. Now, interestingly, some groups, they don't want to put my events in their newsletter because they're like, oh, that would confuse the brand. My brand is the whole tech community. I have to be a thread that runs through everything, because if we're a thread that supports and runs through everything, once in a while, not too often, we can pull on that thread and bring the community together for a special event, for a policy issue, or whatever it is. So our focus is really in 3 areas, and that is education, community and networking, and advocacy. So I not only try to do those things with ATC and my board and volunteers and soon to be more team members, but also if other groups are doing it. So we're part of a group called TECNA, the Technology Councils of North America. And that organization has been around, I think, 30 years. It's been around as long as ATC has been around. Within the United States and Canada and Mexico, there are 100 independent technology councils that serves cities, regions, or states. And 66 of them belong to this group, TECNA, and it's a best practices association. It's a trade association for tech councils, but it's also a lobbying group. They have lobbyists who focus on the needs of small to mid-sized tech companies for issues going on in Washington, D.C. They also have a similar group in Ottawa for the Canadian members. And the idea is that I think it's like 65% of all laws that get passed or killed in Washington are done so by lobbying efforts of the 6 big tech companies. And that's awesome. Right. But their goals are not always the same with small to mid-sized companies.
Sure.
Small to mid-sized companies can't be paying attention to everything that's going on in policy around taxation, around labor, et cetera, because they're small and mid-sized growth-oriented tech companies. They're trying to grow. Right. They're trying to keep their people employed. So that's TECNA and ATC's role is to do that. So we're trying to serve the community in those 3 areas, either us doing it or supporting the other people who are good team players who are doing it.
Very cool.
Fascinating.
And I know that right now membership is for companies. We signed up as We Rock DM. You had mentioned that you may be opening that up to individual memberships in the future. And I wanted to ask, I'm going to add on to that. Do you see any opportunities for students to become members? I'm just thinking about our digital marketing students right now.
No, absolutely. And we've talked about this, and you can't change everything all at once, right? So I created a 3-year plan. And so membership structure is kind of at the end of the 3-year kind of restructure plan that I've been working on. We're a year and a half into that plan. We're hitting our goals. But as far as membership goes, right now, we're set up like what I call sort of the way chambers of commerce have been set up for years, where larger companies pay a little bit more, depends on how many people you have in the area. So smaller companies can afford to be part of it. And that works really well. It's the way most technology councils around the country and in Canada are doing it. But I spend a lot of time, once a year, I go to, a CEO meeting of tech councils, and I ask different councils what they're doing. And some of the newer ones are set up a little bit differently in the way they're structuring their membership. So, we might look for a new way, or like a supporter, individual supporter membership level where they can do that, and then maybe have like a council level, which is for CEOs. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. It's probably a year plus away. But I always welcome students. Most of our events, not all of them, are open to anybody. Our C-Suite Summit is for tech company C-Suite. So it's not for all our members, because it's not for the solution providers. It's for, unless they sponsor, but it's for the tech company C-Suite leaders, from startups all the way through, last year we had people from AWS there, and I think Dell and some others. So director level, usually not the C-Suite of the big companies, but director level and above in that swath. But most of our events, our monthly networking breakfasts, are open to anybody. They just have to pay a little bit more. And I've thought about doing a thing for students where maybe they just pay the member rate. I just haven't had a lot of students want to come. But if a couple of students who were your interns wanted to come, I'd probably let them come for the member rate.
I can actually see if the students know about this, which I don't think they don't know about it. I could see them being interested. I think that there's really great mentoring that could be happening through this council for them. And, Daniel and I have always been really passionate about that. We really encourage our students to network and be mentored and grow and, grow the digital marketing field, which is tech in Austin. So that's great to know that they could join the breakfast. I think that could be really great for them.
And I speak a lot. Professors at St. Ed's and at UT, not every year, but every couple of years, I come in and do a networking class. I've done it in the engineering school. I've done it for the business school, and I've done it for St. Ed's. I've done it for, I'm trying to think, a couple of other educational organizations. And I'll come in and I'll talk about, the power of that network and what you're doing. And I tell, when I speak to young professionals groups or students, I tell them, look, your secret weapon are the relationships you can build along the way. And to build relationships, you've got to be there to help other people. You can't show up in a room and say, hey, there's 50 people here. Who can help me? You just have to keep your ears open and think, oh, what do you do? Ask people about their careers. Ask people about their challenges for their companies. Maybe your dad or your mom or your cousin or your neighbor. Who could you introduce them to? And you don't force it if there's not a connection. But when you find a connection, if you're the person who brings people together, helps people solve their problems, they will never forget you. I mean, one of the reasons I have this job with ATC, it was people who were actively part of my network before I was a full-time professional speaker, when I was involved deeply in the Austin tech community for the law firm, the bank, and the consulting firm where I worked. It was those people who said, Thom, you'd be perfect for this job, and actually opened the doors to get me in and considered by the board. And some of the people on the board even knew me from back then. So I always say, when you build a network and you build a reputation that you're a good person who just wants to help people, you're not like, there's too many takers in the world, right? We're all getting tired of the people who are like, what's in it for me? And I meet with people sometimes and they're like, well, why would I join your organization? How do I 10X my dues? And I'm like, I don't know. You meet the right person, you'll more than 10X it. But if your first words out of your mouth, if I'm not going to go to that unless I know how I 10X my investment, you're never going to build a reputation and a brand. But if you show up and want to serve and help other people, and that becomes your reputation, you'd be surprised how many people out there want to help you in your times of need. And if you're a taker and someone who screws people over, you'd be surprised how many people cheer when you hit the ground. Quietly.
Yeah.
So I've got a tangential kind of question. With your deep knowledge in the history of tech in Austin, where do you see it going in the future? What's around the corner?
I wish I had a crystal ball, but I actually believe the best days of Austin's tech community are ahead of us. I don't think that our best days are over. If you paid attention to the national news in the last 12 to 18 months, there have been a lot of articles written, in tech and on TV and on newspapers and online tech about, the best days of Austin are behind. And they looked at things like Travis County's population didn't grow. It actually shrank, but it was like by less than 1%, 1 quarter last year. And all these articles came out that said, well, it's over for Austin. They didn't look at the whole region. Georgetown's the fastest growing area in the country. Leander, one of the fastest growing areas in the country. Hayes County, growing like crazy. And so our region continued to grow. The center, Travis County, the center of Austin, kind of full. We're not totally full, but there wasn't a lot of room for growth. And what I told people, and I said this on an interview, and it didn't get used for a TV interview, and I asked the reporter why not, and it was because she didn't say this, but it didn't fit what they were trying to say about Austin. But what I said about that population leveling off was, number one, we were still number 5 in the country last year for inbound U-Hauls. So people are still coming. And number two, if you lived in Los Angeles and you moved to Pasadena, nobody would say you left LA. Right? It's a region. LA, I grew up in Los Angeles. When you meet somebody and they say, where are you from? And they say Los Angeles, the first thing a native Angelino will say is, where in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
As if it was accent. A state, right? If you said you grew up in Tennessee, I'd say, where in Tennessee? My wife grew up in Northern California. And when she first met me and I would meet someone from LA, I'd say, where in LA? She goes, LA is not a state. It's not where in LA. It's where in Southern California, or it's where in the area. And I'm like, no, the actual verbiage is where in LA, because I grew up in a town called Arcadia. That was LA. I mean, Orange County, it's LA.
Right.
Yeah.
Topanga.
This isn't like a.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm not surprised that the media has different ways of delivering this information because it's sensitive, right? So my husband and I both moved here from Seattle, and we both were working for in the tech community in Seattle, and that's one of the reasons we chose Austin is because we knew it was up and coming in technology, and it had more sun. Those were the 2 reasons: sunshine and technology. And when we first moved here, we were a little bit nervous to tell people that we moved here from the West Coast. I mean, we were one of those people coming in and, inflating the prices of the Austin, everything. So we got our license. The first thing we did is we got our license plates changed. So they were Washington, just because we felt like we were getting looks when we were driving around like, oh.
Well, I'd love to say, oh, you're one of those people. But I'm one of those people, right? I moved here from the Bay Area in 1991. And I like to joke that apparently I left the door open because when I moved here, all of my friends, two things were said. One is they said, where is Austin? Is it a suburb of Dallas? I'm like, well, it's a 3-hour drive. So no, they didn't necessarily know exactly where Austin was on the map. And number two, all of my friends took bets. They're like, there's no way they're going to stay. They'll be back in 2 years or 3 years. And we've been here 33 years. So, we're not going anywhere for the time being.
Yeah. Same with us. We've been here for 11 years now. And it is, you got to just embrace it for what it is. This is a tech town. It is. And I agree with you. It's just going to keep growing. I agree. And I think it's awesome.
So to finalize your question, I think the best days are ahead. But in order to do that, I think there's a couple things we need to do. Number one is we can't lose that connectivity, that mentorship, that networking culture that existed so strongly in the late 90s and early 2000s. Because we've grown so much, I mean, it used to be, I was quoted back in the 90s in the Business Journal saying that in Austin, Texas, you can have a 3 name tag day because you could go to a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner for networking where they'd throw a name tag on you. That's harder to do now because geographically, if you work downtown, you can't get to a happy hour in the Domain because of traffic. It used to be you could do something central, lunch downtown and then happy hour up in the Arboretum. But now with traffic, you can't do it quite the same and stuff like that. So it's less, and it's never going to be what it was. But we have to take that idea that people are really accessible. One of the things people brag on is that you can reach almost anyone in Austin. But I find it's getting harder. A lot of people don't pick up their phones and they won't call back unless they know what's in it for me. So I think we need to work hard as a community to keep those threads that run through everything and making those people who've been successful understand that you need to be accessible and you need to show up in the community because people need you. We need you for inspiration. We need you for ideas. We need you for mentorship. So I think we have to do that. The second thing is we have to decide who do we want to be. If you go back 30 years, there were 30 or 40 people who helped build this town. And I knew some of them. And I always say, I didn't know all of them, but I say that some of them, I'm sure, none of the ones I knew, of course, some of them had egos. Some of them probably had agendas that were what's in it for me over here, but they checked those at the door and they knew they wanted to build something that would be this tech and innovation hub where people could have jobs. People who graduated from UT could stay here and not have to move to Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, New York. They wanted to create a town that had a vibrant economy. And they all shared that and they worked together and people came together. So I think we need to do that again. We need to bring people together, thought leaders, civic-minded entrepreneurs, and we need to come up with an idea of where we want to go. We didn't meet all of our goals. Opportunity Austin and the Chamber for years would put out a 5-year plan. We never met everything on those 5-year plans, but we moved towards it. So Opportunity Austin has a brand new 5-year plan. I think everybody needs to read it and understand the great things they're doing and why, and then help with the things that you can. We won't hit everything on that plan, but it'll move us forward. And so it's the idea of knowing as a community, we want this to be Austin, something like this anyway. And then having everybody get behind it.
I know that as a nonprofit with a networking focus, memberships are a significant way of driving funds, but they are not the most significant way, I would assume. You've got a fantastic newsletter, and I applaud the fact that you do not just celebrate ATC, you celebrate the community at large. And I well on brand with everything that you're saying, as well as what it sounds like ATC stands for. But what else are you doing from a marketing perspective to drive funds? Because without funds, you're gonna go down. You hold events, but what else?
So, and we need the support of the community, and so do the other business nonprofits that are here in this town. And sometimes people forget that it's those civic-minded leaders who say, we'll join, we'll sponsor, that really drive the ability to have the events that all the organizations in Austin have. If it's not for the community stepping up and helping, this community wouldn't have all of the events that allows us to be this well-networked and growing town. So we always applaud the people who will help us financially. We're a 501c6 because we do advocacy and policy. We don't have a lobbyist on staff, but we could. We don't take stands on a lot of political issues. We are a nonpartisan. ATC is a nonpartisan organization. So we don't take stance on things like the upcoming presidential election. We might have opinions, but we don't take official stances on partisan issues. However, there are issues that come up where we need to plant a flag and say, that is an issue that's an economic development issue. So there's some things that come up in government that you might say is political, but we have to look at it through a business lens. And so because we're a 501c6, we can, when we choose to, take political stances, if you will. So the only two ways I can really make money, I guess I can go out and get some grants for special products, but the only way we can really make money is our dues and sponsorships. And so that's what we need. So I've got to get, more companies, more tech companies, more of the solution providers to get behind us and say, we believe in what you're doing, because the more that join and the more that step up and sponsor, the more we can add staff and do more programs. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. So what I'm trying to do is really on the brand building right now and letting people know that we're in this for the long haul. We've been here for 32 years, but it's a brand new day. I joke that I'm a 32-year-old startup. We can do a lot of things with this foundation that we have in the Austin Technology Council. But to do that, we need the right leaders who want to be heard. They want their voice to be part of it, and they care. And so I have a couple of ways I do it. My biggest three are my newsletter. We have a pretty good following. We have over 10,000 people. And because we talk about events, our events and other groups' events, I get a really high open rate on that newsletter compared to everyone else I know who sends a newsletter. So, the newsletter is a good communication tool for us. LinkedIn has become a very good tool. I get a lot of views and a lot of forwards and a lot of comments from LinkedIn. I use Instagram. I don't think it gets us very much. We don't have very many followers, but I like that. And I'm moving into more video. So with Instagram, I'm moving into creating more reels because that'll get a farther reach.
Yes.
And through YouTube, that. And then the last thing, I guess I said three, but there's really four, is we have a podcast. And the podcast is called Austin Tech Connect. And I focus on interviewing the leaders of tech companies. Usually it's technologists. It's not the lawyers, the bankers, the solution providers. I usually try to interview leaders in tech companies, homegrown or those who have big offices here, who have something to say. Typically, it's not a startup. It's not Brian or Becky with just an idea. Typically, it's people who have employees and products or services that are being sold. And I like to hear about their individual story. And then I like to hear about their company and what they're doing that's so great. And then I ask them, what do you think's the state of our technology community and where are we going? And so so the podcast also has a pretty good reach. I get 700 to 1,000 downloads, which for a small local show I think is pretty good.
That's fantastic.
Maybe a little less on some. It kind of depends who's on it. If they promote it, that's when I get those higher numbers. If they're just on it and don't or post about it, I get less. But it's those things, and combined, I try to reposition some of the stuff. Like in the newsletter, I promote the podcast, and on social media, I talk about the events. And so I try to make sure everything is sort of promoting itself as best I can. But I do it all myself. Somebody asked me the other day, who did you hire, to do all of the social media? And I'm like, me. And they're like, well, who writes your newsletter? And I'm like, I do. And they go, well, you can't be writing the article at the top every single week. Well, I can because I'm a writer. I've written 12 books. I did my own podcast. My own blog back when blogs were the hottest thing. I did my own blog 5 days a week for like 10 years. So I can sit down and write a 500-word essay pretty quick. I do use digital tools to check my grammar now. So I go out with a lot less typos and a lot less bad grammar. But, I'm doing it because right now I'm the face. But ATC, it can't be the Thom show. And that's why I need more volunteers. I need more staff. I need more people on my board. And I need more people in the community who want to stand up and say, hey, we all need to do this as a community. And that's why I play with all the other nonprofits. Jeremy at the Chamber and I have become very good friends. The leader at SHIP team at Austin Women in Technology. They're one of the best collaborating organizations I've encountered. The Association for Corporate Growth, the woman who is their local executive executive director, she is so fantastic. Probably the best person in any nonprofit in Austin. She's run it for 18 years and she's my wife. So Sarah Singer runs the Association for Corporate Growth, and we'll be at an event and I'll go to one of her. She puts on amazing lunches. She has a couple of great signature events. So I'll go and attend, support, and show up, and I'll meet them and they'll find out about ATC and they'll be like, oh my God, I have to introduce you to somebody. And more than once, I've had someone, even someone who's known me for years, grab me by the hand, take me to the front desk where she's got the name tags and she's doing check-in. They're like, you guys have to meet. You have the same last name.
That's funny.
Interesting.
But it's through a combination of all that digital and social media and video, and podcast, and then it's being present in the community and supporting everyone else in the community that I can. Is how I think the magic is going to be made, because I won't be in this role forever. I serve at the pleasure of the board. They could change their mind about me anytime they want. And, I'm still a relatively young man. Other opportunities could come my way. So I want to make sure that when that day comes, that baton gets passed, whether it's soon or whether it's 6 or 7 years from now, I want to make sure that this organization is financially strong. And I want to make sure that the reputation and the brand of this organization is forward looking, so that whoever would take the role next time doesn't have to reinvent it. I'm trying to document, like with the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, 10 years ago, ATC tried this idea. They put one person in it, and then no one ever did anything with it again. So I'm documenting exactly where myself and my board have decided the Austin Tech Hall of Fame should go in the next 5 to 10 years, so that somebody else could step in and keep it alive. Yeah, they can tweak it how they want, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel, every 3 to 5 years if you get a new leader. So I'm trying to make it a community organization. We were started as a grassroots organization, and I'm trying to give ATC back to the grassroots and let them take the reins for where it goes next.
I love it. And your digital marketing strategy combined with what you're trying to do with in-person networking, that's where the magic happens. Those two things, you really can't have one or the other. You need to have the networking in person, but then you do need to get the word out digitally, because that helps. But then you need to get people, they work together. They're both really important.
Yep.
Yeah, very cool.
So one last question before we close the show, if you don't mind. We're
going to have to say goodbye. I've been enjoying this. I don't want to leave.
Good.
I don't want to leave. I'm holding on to the microphone. I'm not going anywhere.
Thom, I love that. Daniel and I talk about this topic you're talking about all the time, especially, as teachers. We really relate to what you are saying, and this is what we're teaching. So we love that you have been on our podcast talking about this, and we will definitely get the word out for you. We're really excited that we get to be members of the Austin Technology Council. I think it's a perfect fit for us. We're excited.
I did want to ask, and it's probably going to be something similar to what maybe you've already said, so that's okay. But what is one actionable piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is listening to this podcast or sees a blurb, a little YouTube short, in regards to whichever subject you want, whether it's ATC focused or your speaking gig? What is one piece of actionable advice that you would give to a small to medium-sized business owner who's looking to grow?
So the piece of advice I would give to a small to medium-sized business owner who wants to grow themselves and their team is they need to look around their community, and the community could be local, in our case, Austin, or their community could be their industry. In your case, digital marketing. In my case, association management, or in my case of being a speaker, professional speaker. What are the organizations that exist that serve your community? And then you need to pick 2 or 3 per person in your organization. You can get by with 1, but I think 2 organizations per person. So like for me, I'm super involved in the National Speakers Association, but I'm also involved very heavily now in Technology Councils of North America, because when you can get around people who are doing the jobs that you aspire to do or aspire to do better, they can't help it. Success leaves clues. So when you get around people who are doing the business that you want to be doing, they're going to drop a little nugget here, a theory there, an example over there, and you're going to be able to learn from them. So get involved with 2 or 3 organizations per person in your organization. And on a local basis, make sure somebody is involved. Not everybody's going to like the vibe of every group. So find what works for people, what their jobs are. So if they're the CFO, maybe they should be going to FEI. If they're the HR person, maybe they should be going to SHRM. If they're, in leadership or sales, maybe they should be going to ATC or the Chamber of Commerce or something like that. But if everybody in your organization goes to 2 networking groups and then they make it a priority, they have to go. Most of these groups have 1 event a month. So you're saying, I'm committed to being at 2 networking events a month. Maybe some have a little more, but 2. And you just show up and you participate and you help people. All of a sudden, the individual is going to learn, and the individual is going to have opportunities to build their network and grow. But everybody will say, oh my God, how big is your company? Everywhere I go, I see somebody from We Rock DM. This was when I was the marketing director for a tech law firm. We had 14 lawyers in the technology business law group. People would ask me, what do you have, 30 or 40 lawyers? And I'm like, why do you say that? And they're like, I never go to an event where one of your lawyers isn't there. Well, that's because I managed every business event in town. Everyone was assigned to 1 or 2 groups, and then I made sure they were going. And if they couldn't go, I made sure someone went in their place. So back in that 5.5 years I worked for those 2 law firms, there was never a business event where at least one person, sometimes it would be me, or at least a business group that mattered, somebody was at every single event every single time. And it kind of made the other law firms upset because I was managing it. And if no lawyer could go because they were busy, I would show up and be the face of the firm. But over that 5 years, everybody thought that group of lawyers was bigger than it was because you would always see them. So that's my advice is don't do drop-in networking. Once in a while I go to ATC. Once in a while I go to Fiesta. Once in a while I go to this. Make sure everybody has picked 1 or 2 associations, groups, and they always go, because it takes 7 to 10 times, not before someone's part of your network. It takes 7 to 10 times before people even notice you're showing up. So it's going to take you a year to get noticed, and maybe another 6 months or a year to start building relationships. Networking doesn't happen, automatically. And it doesn't happen because you just say, I'm going to go network. You've got to be an active part of that community, and you've got to be part of that community, not saying what's in it for me, but leading in, how do I serve the community? And when you do that, what's in it for you is going to double and triple.
All right. I lied, because now I have a follow-up question.
Not the last question. Okay. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here forever.
Okay. So for someone who's new to networking, they go to these networking events, they wear the name tag. What then? How do they actively participate? They may or may not be comfortable talking to strangers. This is not that kind of an issue. It is, what should they do? Should they sit at a stranger's table? What actively should they do when they get there?
Well, it is true that people say, well, Thom, you're an extrovert. This is easy for you. Yes, maybe, but this isn't about introvert, extrovert, right? It's about, caring about the people around you. And most introverts I know are actually better networkers. And people go, what? Why are introverts better networkers? Because they'll ask more questions and they'll listen. And the reality is most extroverts are talking about themselves. And when you're talking, they're thinking, what can I say next? So introverts are actually better at this. So if you're a little more shy, realize you're going to be a better networker in the long run. But I always tell people the mistake we've made for the past 30 years is we teach everybody, memorize an elevator pitch. And you know what the elevator pitch is, right? The idea is you memorize 3 or 4 sentences that are quippy and fun about yourself. And when you meet somebody and you think, like in my case, I think, they could join ATC or, oh my gosh, they're going to have an event. They could hire a speaker. And I flick a switch in my back and go like, hi, my name's Thom Singer. I run an association. I've written 12 books. I speak at conferences like yours, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over them. If that happened in an elevator, what would they do when we got to the lobby and the doors open?
Step out.
They'd run. Yeah, they'd step away. So if you lead with your elevator pitch, you're going to repel people, because when they get to the lobby, quote unquote lobby, they're going to run. So the idea is, don't talk about yourself right off the bat. Yeah. Memorize 2 or 3 questions that gets other people to talk about their career. And one of the best questions you can ask at a networking event is, why did you come to this event today? And they'll tell you. And the reason they came might be different than the reason you came. So now you've learned something new. Like, oh, that's a good reason. And get them to talk. How long have you been in your job? Great question in Austin. How long have you lived in Austin, and what brought you here? You go through all those questions, get them to tell you about them. And eventually most of them will turn around and ask you questions. Some don't, but most will. And they've actually done like psychological studies on this. and they've taken people, you've probably seen this on reality TV. They send a couple on a blind date and they put like a camera in the flowers. They float microphones in the beer and they record everything. And then they interview them afterwards and say, what did you think? The person who talks the most says, I love him. I hope we get married and have 3 kids. The person who talks the least goes, yeah, I don't know if I want to go on a second date. So when you meet people, ask them a lot of questions, get them to talk. The more you can get them to talk, the more they're just naturally going to like you. And when you hear something, and it won't happen with everybody, it's like 1 in 10 times, somebody tells you what they do, what they need, what a perfect client is. And you're like, oh my God, that's Mary Beth. Follow through and make that introduction. When you have a connection for them, be that connector, because if you're that connector, people are going to want to be in your orbit. If your reputation is, God, he introduced me to a lot of people, they're going to be there for you. So my advice is ask questions, listen, connect, then talk about yourself.
That is such good advice and so true. And I'm over here laughing about your elevator pitch. I'm in a master's program right now, and literally I have an elevator pitch assignment, and I hate it because it feels so unnatural. I would never talk to somebody like that. I would do exactly what you said. I would start talking about them and asking about them and what they do. That's how I do things, right? So that's so funny.
Well, and don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place where you should have memorized who you are and what you do so well. Because when you're at a table and somebody says, let's all introduce ourselves, you want to do it short, clear, and concise.
True.
Awesome. So you should memorize something about yourself that says, here's who I am and here's what I do so well. But don't lead with it when you meet somebody.
Yeah, and I guess that we do this sometimes. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I guess that would be a challenge for people who have a hard time talking about themselves, right? So you're right. There has to be both. You have to be ready to talk about yourself at some point. So yeah.
Well, one thing also is if you're asking them questions and they're responding, and then they don't turn around and ask you questions, then they weren't good for your network. I mean,
that's right. They just did you a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a twofer.
They did you a favor and showed you that they're not a good networker. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. Off the water's back, right?
We know a good client this way too, right, Daniel? Like if the client is asking us questions and then we're like, okay, they're interested. If they're not really asking us questions, we kind of know. So yeah,
that's right.
It's important.
Well, that takes us to the end of this episode of We Rock DM Amplified. Thom, I can't thank you enough for joining us, for inviting us into your network, your organization. We are incredibly excited to be part of the ATC ourselves. Personally, am really now feeling very much more invigorated to go out there myself, because as Trisha will tell you, I'm a bit of a recluse. I'm an introvert. I like to just keep myself to myself. And everything that you said in this podcast today has resonated very, very deeply with me. And I want more. So thank you, Thom, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. So such a great episode. I can't wait to send this out to the world and tell people about the Austin Technology Council.
Thanks for tuning in to the We Rock DM podcast. We hope you found our discussions on digital marketing and web design and development helpful and informative. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date on the latest trends and strategies in the world of online business. We'll see you in the next episode of We Rock DM, where we make kick-ass stuff kick ass.